Hello everybody, this is Ryan with Reptile Enclosures. I'm back with a new tutorial on making foam backgrounds. I start out with a 3/4 inch foam. I glue it on with silicone so I know it is safe. And the first part of this is making cracks. So to make cracks, I'll score it with a knife, as you can see here, and then just simply break it, separate it a little bit. Now the silicone is still wet, so I can easily move it here to do this. I'll score it again, crack it again, and it gives me a nice realistic looking crack effect. Another way that I'll do like the longer cracks that you see and the ones that aren't perfectly straight, I use my hot knife. I make a real sharp point with it, and it's a good way to hide. You can see the seam there between the pieces of board. So by doing this, I can hide that a little better. By doing a sort of a rough crack, I'll kind of go up and down and bigger and smaller by going pushing it a little harder or lighter to make try and hide that seam there, make it look a little bit nicer. There's no real rhyme or reason to it, and you can sort of have fun with it. Start out with some bigger ones and then add in little ones that break off of it, just to give it that a more realistic effect to it. Now, as far as carving the texture, I changed the shape of my hot knife a little bit. You can do this with a cheap hot knife that goes straight across, but it is a lot nicer to have one that's flexible where you can bend the wire to shape it you want. And what I'm doing here is I don't want to do heavy texture, but I want to carve out some of it. It'll give it a little bit more of some depth to it instead of being flat rock. You can change the shape as you go. You can go left to right, up and down. And sometimes just changing the direction will give you a completely different look. If you're doing more of a sandstone style, go left to right. That way you get the ridges across better. What I'm doing there is I was just using the hot knife to shape the edge of that crack just a little bit better, so it flowed into the texture that I'm doing here. So this hot knife is I can't remember the brand. It wasn't cheap. It's a professional one, so it's probably 150 bucks or something with the power supply and everything for it. You can get a cheap one off of Amazon that works just as well, or well, not just as well, but it works for a do-it-yourself type thing. You don't necessarily need to buy the most expensive hot knife out there. What you want to do is to try to not do too many patterns. So if you see, like on the left there, it kind of looks real rigid, like a pattern down. Things like that, you can run through it if you want and just try to reshape it a little bit so it doesn't look so patterned. You want it to look real natural, and the not looking pattern is the best for doing a natural look to it. So it's a time-consuming process. It takes some patience and some time to get through it, but the more you do, the nicer it looks. You really can't go wrong with this. You can fix just about anything you mess up later on in the process if you have to, or you can always just replace that piece of foam. It's not that expensive, but most of it you can fix pretty easily. And you can also layer foam too. Like on this here, I'm doing a flat background, but you could actually put some smaller pieces of foam on there first and then cut through both of them, or cut them as you go, because it does get hard to cut through the silicone. But that way you can have more depth to it too if you want. So really this whole process is just what you're seeing here. It's just working your way through cutting and shaping. It works the same for big rocks and things like that too. You just cut and shape them the way you want them to. And then what I'll do is I hit it with the torch. You gotta be careful with this, kids at home. Ask your parents, kind of thing. But you just want to lightly hit it. You don't want to burn it, because you will burn through it fairly easy. But by giving it just a little bit of heat to it, it'll kind of smooth it out a little bit, not make it quite so rough. It'll give the foam, because it melts all the little teeny pieces in the foam, gives it more of a realistic texture to it. You may not be able to see it real good in the video, but the effect is huge when you really see it. I think I'll show you here a little close up in a second, but you can hit it in. This part here where I didn't carve, you can do it too if you're just going for a smoother rock face. So you can do a combination of both, whichever's better, and it really helps to smooth out those edges. Here's a close-up with the torch, and you should be able to see a little bit better what the effect it does to it. It does burn back a little bit on spots, so be careful of that. A little bit of flame is normal. It usually puts itself out quite a bit if you're not holding it on there too much. I'm using MAP gas, but propane works just fine. But there you can see the texture that it gives, that real rock texture to it. Now a lot of times I'll go back and recut my cracks after I've done the shaping. I'll add in some more little details and just enough to kind of clean it up. Make sure that they're good, because when you do heat them, they do shrink up a little bit sometimes or go flat. So any spots that need to be recut or deeper, and just go back over them again, and then you can hit them with the torch again if you want, or leave them as is if you want a sharper crack. Either way is fine. It's kind of I don't want to say trial and error, but more of an art than a science to it. By twisting my hot knife, if I turn it straighter or more, it gives me wider versus thinner cracks, so you can change the variance and thickness of your cracks just by turning the knife. I try not to make them too deep or too sharp, because it is hard later on to get the epoxy in them. Now you can see there where the foam is offset. I will go back later and fix that. I'll show you in the next video as I start doing epoxy and putty and fill that area in. I was just trying to show as I go, and some of it's a little trickier to do and record at the same time. But this is realistically about it for making a fake background. Later on I'm going to do some more detailed on actual rocks and stuff like that. But this is the finished, all ready for coat.